welcome to Disabled and Proud. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm loving the sunshine. I'm lapping it up. I'm scared it's going to go in like a week, so I want to be in as much as possible.
I've got my fingers crossed that it stays until at least the end of the September.
Oh yeah, that would be nice. An Indian summer, I'd be down for that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, all day long.
I am so looking forward to this chat today because I think there's going to be so much to talk about with regards to disabled modeling and how you got involved in that. And I think it's going to be such an interesting one to me to learn from, because I love talking to like all the people that come on the podcast. I love having these chats with them because I learn something new every single time. And I feel like there's going to be something new that I'm going to learn today. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, well, thank you for having me on, inviting me on. So that's great. And I would also love to kind of like just be able to share and inspire others and just kind of like know that people like me do exist. And I think that's important.
I think so too. So I'll dive in with my first question for you.
Okay.
And
Ready.
That is, how do you refer to your disability?
So I have EDS, I'm a wheelchair user. And yeah, I'm disabled and proud to be disabled. Yeah. It took me a while to get there, but I am.
Yeah. And EDS it's Ehlers-Danlos, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's to do with your joints, I know that much.
Yes, it's a connective tissue disorder. Your collagen is a bit all over the place, and it kind of your joints do more than they should do. And my big thing for me, for one of the reasons why I'm a wheelchair user, is because of my hips and my pelvis. That's where like the main problem is, but it affects all your joints.
Yeah.
And basically like I dislocate very easily, I bruise very easily, but then it also comes with things like fatigue and being as well. So it's quite an extensive range of symptoms. Not everybody's wheelchair users. Some people are and some people aren't. Some people use crutches, or some people don't use any form of mobility aids at all. So there's different severities in the condition. I've not been a wheelchair user all my life. I've only been a wheelchair user for the past 16 and a bit years. So I've had life on both sides of the track, so to speak. Yeah.
And it's interesting because a close friend of mine does have EDS as well. Yeah. And I know that it can differ from person to person, and like exactly what you were saying in terms of like its severity, what joints can be more affected than others. So like, for example, my friend has shoulders that tend to pop out left, right and center. And it's for me, because it's so different to my disability, it's so interesting because I don't have those same problems. Like my joints don't pop out. I'm missing a limb. So that creates other problems in my body. And I'm always intrigued to know about how it individually affects the person, because it is just so individual.
It's very individual. I mean, it's like a management process. Like my condition comes with a lot of pain. I'm always in pain. It's continuous. It flares up. So it gets. If more things I do, then like the more pain I'm in. Like as I get tired, it then becomes more painful, and it's like a struggle, because then you're not being careful with what you're doing as well, and then therefore what you're kind of injuring yourself sometimes, or like you do things and you're like, because you're tired, you're kind of putting yourself in more pain. So it's a balancing act. It's one that it requires pain management, planning, pacing. But at the same time, I do a lot of people say, oh my gosh, you do so much. Like someone sent me a message yesterday saying how much I inspire them, because I do in like 2 days what they don't do in 2 months. But the thing about it is like it is a management process as well. Like I do train, I work out, but then I have like some hours off where I'm kind of like, okay, let's kind of rest and recover from that session, and then I go again, kind of thing. So I trained this morning, I had a rest period, then I had a shoot this this afternoon, and now I'm kind of, I'm chilling, I'm talking to you, having a nice conversation, and then I'll eat dinner and I'll kind of like wind down quite early. Yeah, so it's just about pacing yourself. But then tomorrow is quite a more chilled day. It's not so packed. It's not so it's just about kind of management and managing of it. Also, sometimes just managing expectations, where people want you to be out like, oh, like here, there, everywhere. And people kind of like, they forget, because I am so active and I'm out and about, they also forget like that there's that side of it sometimes, and you have to kind of remind them. And I feel like boundaries is like very important, like for you to articulate your needs as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it is a process. But yeah, I do feel that, like with anything in life, sometimes you kind of like, it's about balancing act, and too much of one thing isn't good. But I was like, well, if I do nothing, I'm in pain. If I do something, I'm in pain. So I might as well try and
keep it balanced. And it's interesting because and the only reason I'm asking is because I remember my friend having a really difficult time being diagnosed with EDS, and I remember it was I remember it being such a nightmare for her to try and be diagnosed. And I was wondering, what was that process like for you? Because I've spoken to a few people with EDS, and it generally seems to be that they almost bat this off as a diagnosis almost until the end point where they're like, actually, this is what it is, and now we don't really know where we're going from here.
I don't know if you've ever heard this saying, when you hear hoofs, think of horses, not zebras. And that's it's like a medical saying that they teach doctors in training, saying that it's not always going to be some exciting diagnosis. Chances are it's going to be a bog standard thing. It's just that it isn't something elaborate. Unfortunately, with EDS, we are the elaborate, we are the zebras. Hence why we are actually called medical zebras, and that's kind of like our emblem for EDS. So with that, like, they don't want to think that, oh, it's probably this, it's probably that, because 9 times out of 10, that's what that is. But we are that one that it ain't. And it's so hard because the process was, oh my gosh, like, there were so many missing or opportunities to diagnose me as a child growing up, just like certain situations that they just didn't miss. It's, oh, she doesn't want to go to school. I mean, like, what child complains of back pain at 9 years old, like, and hips, and that's not a thing that, I shouldn't need an orthopedic bed at 9 because my back was like there was so many, they're just, oh, she doesn't want to go to school. That's not the case. Like, sometimes, like, they just don't listen to children. And then growing up, they say, oh, it's growing pains, it's this, it's that, it's
classic growing pains.
Growing those down growing pains. they're responsible for so many things. Those poor things getting blamed for everything. But yeah, and it was just a case of like missed opportunities time and time again. And then back in 2015, no, it wasn't 2015, it was 2005. It was so quickly, just went I literally went downhill real quick. Within 7-8 months, I went from not no form of mobility issues to having mobility issues. I was on crutches to then being in a wheelchair. And it was like, wow, how am I using a wheelchair? Like, there was a bit of, it was like, there was resistance to it. Like, it sat there in the corner of the room for a month. I refused to. I was like, no, I'm not disabled. But I was just to the point where it's like, well, how am I going to get there otherwise? So I had to think of it practically, and then it was another 2.5 years before I was diagnosed. And it was literally like banging my head against a brick wall. And the doctor's thinking, at one point I was thinking, is it in my head?
I was literally about to say, did you go through the, is it me?
Yeah, like literally, I've, so many different consultants, local hospitals, specialist hospitals, this consultant, that consultant, this one's the top guy here, this one here. They wanted to open me up, but what you're looking for? The next one was like, we're going to refer you to that one so he can do that. And I was like, well, I can't do that without a reason. That's like, surgery is invasive. You don't just put anyone thinking, okay, let's see.
Let's see what's there.
Yeah, kind of thing. Like, like MRI after MRI, MRIs with dye, CT scans, all sorts. I'm sure at one point they just was like, we just don't believe her, because without actually saying so. And he's like, even at one point, it was like, well, it depends if you want to get better or not, kind of talk like, so they sent me for physio and it was making it worse. That's what sped up. Because at the time I was on crutches and it kind of just, the physio made it worse. And then and he was like, well, if you really want to get better, you will do it. And I was like, I did it. And then within a matter of weeks, I couldn't move at all. And it just exacerbated it. I made it 10 times worse than it was. Wow. And it was only when I was diagnosed, they said that I should never have gone through the physio in the first place.
It is unbelievably amazing how many times people get sent to physio for the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And like people thinking that that's going to be like the cure, like, oh, like your back hurts, good physio.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, physio is amazing if you need it and it's like the right time and place, but
I agree.
It's like a plaster almost, being like, okay, we'll just like plaster over the crack, like don't worry about it.
Yeah, but you've not actually sorted the issue.
Yeah,
you've not sorted the issue, and you've not diagnosed me. You want me to send me to physio, and I was like, and me questioning it, they always, unfortunately, put it down. You could see in this face, this difficult Black woman, like kind of thing as well, not really listening to me. There's been times, and it just didn't. My boyfriend's white English, and there's just times they just didn't even talk to me. They spoke to him, like to say that I couldn't even understand what they were saying. It was awful. It was like literally like awful, and he would be like, well, talk to her. And it was like, but it was almost, I remember one time this doctor kind of eye rolled, like to say I was being, oh, really? Like, yeah, I was like, at this point, like he had enough at this point, and he managed to sort out private medical care and then it was at that point when we started heading down the road to diagnosis. And we had been referred to this particular guy at the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital, and it was when but the appointment kept on getting pushed back, and it was like 6 months down the line. And then when we got the private healthcare, we were like, right, okay, let's get this sorted. And we saw him the following week on private. We were like,
how does this work?
Yeah, and then it was like a game changer, because after it was like for the first time, it felt like somebody was actually listening to me. It wasn't like a 5 minute, you barely get in the room and they're trying to get you out. It was like a whole hour. And I've never spent that much time with any consultant or doctor that actually listened to what I was saying. And he really did listen to what I was saying. He said that he thought he had an inkling on what the situation was. And then he said he needs to do some investigative work. I went into hospital and then did that. And then when I came to, he was like, because I was under general anesthetic. And when I came through, he was like, I'm like 99.9% sure that this is what you got. Could have kissed him. He then referred me to a professor that's like the top guy in the world in this field. And I saw him like the following week, and he confirmed it. And like, for the first time I had a name. And I just, like, in fact, everything that he was talking about, it felt like he was there spying on me since childbirth. Like as soon as I was born, he was like, how did you know? It's like he was telling my life story. It was just insane. And I mean, I felt, they were like, oh, maybe you need, I remember one that said this thing, I just think he just needs physio and counselling. I was like, that's not a diagnosis.
This is not why I'm still here.
No, and it was great. But then it was then I started mourning what, because at that point the realization kicked in. And then, for 2.5 years, you just wanted to have an answer. You wanted a name, you got the name, and then it was like dealing with that name and what comes with it, and just realizing that I'm not going to be fixed. I'm not gonna not ever feel like I'm in pain again. I'm never gonna walk again. So it's that kind of realization, and you kind of mourn your old you, and then you realize you wasn't even happy when you were your old you, and you're mourning something that you didn't even particularly.
It's a cycle, isn't it? Like it's such a cycle, because you it's almost like relief because you now know exactly what's going on, but then at the same time, like, upset because nobody gave you the answer sooner, and also like a part of your life before like this diagnosis now no longer exists, and there's a whole new life ahead of you, and like that's a bit scary. It's a bit unknown, and it's not like when you get a diagnosis with like EDS, or like if you acquire a disability, it's not like somebody hands you a handbook that's like, you're now disabled, like these are all the things that you need to know about what's going to happen, and like this is how you're going to feel. Like nobody gives you that handbook. You're completely left to your own devices to figure out how you feel, what you feel. And also, like, obviously internalized ableism is such a thing. Like, figure out like every X, Y, and Z,
your community base, everything. Like,
it all changes.
Your household, like stuff that you just putting up with for the time being. Now you're like, okay, this needs to be fixed permanently, because this can't be working. Like, we can't work like this for the rest of my life. You kind of look at a range of things, like the vehicle we were driving, like the living situation. We was living in a studio, privately rented. That can't work. We couldn't have modifications. I'm like, well, I can't live like this, like, and it's just so many different levels of things, and you're like, that you've got to kind of factor in. And they sent me to rehabilitation, which was more about getting used to the fact that this is the diagnosis. It's literally the last road when they send you there. It's like the last stop. And you have had counsel, had therapy, and you have that group sessions as well. And it did help, because it kind of, skills, you like how to slide transfer, and just like what
things
to do if something
dropped taught before.
Like what to do if something drops on the floor. You don't try and bend forward, you try and kind of pick it up from the side, not forward, otherwise you might fall like a chair forward, things like that. So it's like literally kind of like learning, but it was like learning and mourning all at the same time. And that process took about 5 years north. And then I was in my mid-20s. I was like, and then also like people associating disability with accidents and age doesn't help as well. Like
this exact thing.
like to say that everybody who's a wheelchair, like even other people with disabilities, they do the same thing, and they were like, oh, were you in an accident? No, like. And why are you asking me that? Like, why do I have to tell you my medical history? And like, if I want to talk about it, I'll talk about it. It's not like I'm ashamed to talk about it, but I feel like when you've had no form of dialogue, no conversation, or you've only had just a hi, how are you? And all of a sudden it's, so why are you in a wheelchair then? And then they're like, oh, if you don't mind me asking. Then if you say, yeah, I do mind, then it looks like you've got the problem. It's one of those hard ones to balance.
It is such a difficult one to navigate, because like factually disabled people do not owe you their medical history at all. Like
they don't at all.
They don't. But somehow society thinks that it's completely acceptable to suddenly ask someone their medical history. And I think about this quite a lot, and I'm like, in a bar, if I was in a bar, I would never go up to like, I'm really sorry to discriminate against the gingers, but you're just the first group that came to my head. I'd never go up to a guy who's ginger and be like, oh, can you give me your medical history? You wouldn't do it. So why is it acceptable to suddenly turn around and do it to like people who are disabled? How is it acceptable? Like, what I've just spoken about is exactly what happens to us, but yet we would never dream of doing it the other way.
No, and it is quite, sometimes it's very intrusive. There's days that I don't mind being open, and then there's days I just want to get on with my life, like, because I don't get up in the morning and be thinking, oh, I'm disabled.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm disabled. And my medical history is this. You you get up and you get on with your life. And the only time that is really a factor is when you find something that you're not able to access.
Yeah.
And that's the only time that I personally feel, well, not the only time, there's 2 times that I feel particularly disabled, is when I can't access something that I want to access. And when I'm in excruciating pain and I'm absolutely like, okay, I can't pretend anymore. I can't plow through it. This is like, no. And I become irritable and like unfriendly. and like your patience, so you just have none at that point. You're like, I don't have patience for this. I don't have time for this. I can't tolerate your nonsense anymore. And it's just, and those are the times when I would feel particularly like disabled. Generally, I don't. As I said, I don't wake up first thing in the morning and be like, yeah. It's just like it's become part of who I am.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's more to who I am, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and like I think that's a really like it's an interesting one, because it can be quite a fine line to dance between being like, yes, I am disabled and that is a massive part of me, but also it's not necessarily my whole identity, even though it is an identity marker, and it's trying to find that, like I said, like a fine line, and it is literally a dance between my identity is a disabled woman or a disabled person, or like that isn't my whole identity, but it's a very big part of me, and like the two are not interdependent, but at the same time sometimes they are. It's like it's a really, again, it's a bit like a cycle, isn't it? Because some days you feel like you're way more like you identify with that so much more than other days, where like, you know, some days for me, for example, I'll just crack on and I don't even have to think about how I can't clap my hands. Like it's not something that I think about. And there are other days where I'm like, whoa, today is a day where like I can't carry everything I want to carry. I can't necessarily do the same stuff in the gym, which is going to annoy me, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. And it's like finding that line, isn't it? And you're like, oh yeah. And I don't think there is ever going to be like an answer to where the line is. Like it's completely individual for everyone, but it's trying to like dance around it and find a way that like suits you to on both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, you know, with anything, it's about finding a balance, and what works for you isn't really, you know, I've had to learn that it's not about making like non-disabled people feel comfortable. It's about me feeling comfortable. Like I am not going to go into a space that is not being catered to me. When I mean catered to me, I mean like, you know, you go somewhere and the access isn't great, and then they're like, oh, but we can carry you. No, you cannot.
No,
you cannot carry me. I was like, oh, but this is, you know, it says, oh, there's few of us. No, there's 2 reasons. One, my chair is heavy. 2, I'm not going to be carried in. I want to be able to just go in like everybody else. I don't want everyone looking at me, be like, oh, look at, you know, I don't want that. That's not what it's about. And while it is nice that you offered the help, it's not the help we want. What the help we want is you getting around.
Yes.
Paying 90 quid and getting around. And the amount of places that don't have a ramp, and it's just like, it's not even that expensive. It's just crazy, to be honest.
It's a wild one, but actually this kind of ties in quite nicely with what I was going to talk about next. And you said that your diagnosis happened round about when you're in your mid-20s, which can be quite like a formative time in most people's life, or like everyone's life, to be honest. And I was wondering, how did that diagnosis and everything else that comes along with it, how did that impact the career path that you went down, and what were your thoughts and feelings towards your career at that point in time, and how has it led you to where you are now?
It's interesting, to be honest, because as a teenager growing up, I always wanted to be a model. And I remember going around to several big modeling agencies and seeing the likes of Naomi Campbell and Kate Moss on walls and stuff like that. And they told me to lose weight. And I was, you know, I'm 5'10". At the time I was size 10. I was very slim. And I was just like, well, I'm not going to do that. Like, especially like being Jamaican. It's like I was already skinny in a way. They just kept on wanting to fatten me up. So it's like, I'm not going to lose any weight. I'm like, so I had to accept that it just wasn't for me in a way. I was like, okay, maybe it's not for me, but it's always something that I wanted to do. I wanted to be a fashion model. I wanted to kind of work in that industry. I've always dreamt of working in fashion ever since I was young. Yeah, so it was always something that I wanted to do. But I always wanted to travel as well. And I kind of went down the travel route. Like, so I actually was in my early to mid-20s actually working in the travel industry. So, and then I was made redundant because like at the time, there were several wars going on and certain events happened and a lot of people was like not traveling as much. And it kind of hit the travel industry kind of like knock on. But the pandemic now. But
we loved the pandemic. It was such a blast.
I know, yeah, but it's in this sense it was different because it wasn't because people weren't able to travel, people chose not to travel.
Yeah.
So unlike now, everybody can travel and everyone's gone. And
everyone's gone nuts for it, haven't they?
Yeah. So with that, I was made redundant. It was either that or take a massive pay cut, and I was like, well, I'm on the redundancy. So I then went traveling, and then when I came back, I was applying for some airline jobs and stuff like that. And then it was at that point that things started to go downhill. Yeah. So that's what kind of happened really. So at the time I was doing like a part-time bar job trying to figure out my life.
Yeah.
So I wasn't do I try and stick in travel? I had applied for some jobs abroad, air stewardessing, things like that, or do I want to be based here? And so I had like several jobs interviews and stuff, but like lined up, but because of my health situation, I couldn't really, because it was like a big question mark, like
what's going on?
Yeah, kind of thing. And then as I started to use the wheelchair, it just became, everything was just focused on that diagnosis. Like I did not have like the mental capacity for anything else, to be honest, at that point. So, but yeah, and then, fast forward 5 years, and then coming out of this fog and started to live a bit, and I got a power chair to be more independent. And I moved out, got my house, live on my own. I wanted to know that I can be dependent on my own and independent as a disabled person as well, and just kind of get to know who I am again. And then I decided to start a blog in 2016. So this was like 11 years now after after the first kind of start of everything. And I started a blog. I was about to celebrate my blog's first birthday when I was scouted in the street by two women who belonged to a modeling agency, and they invited me to a test shoot. And the next day, and they signed me to their modeling agency, and that's how I became signed. And I worked with loads of brands, but then also through blogging and social media and doing the influencing side, content creation, I've worked with even more brands. And so by doing what I was doing with the blogging and the social media route, that also has landed me opportunities to work with brands and stuff, like being featured in Vogue, for example. So that was a pretty huge thing.
I was gonna say, that's massive.
Yeah.
Just casually gloss over it, like, oh, I was once in Vogue.
Yeah. No, so it was like last September. So that was kind of so that was kind of cool. I was like, wow, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So I said, okay, my next house, I've still got another dream of mine. I've been in it, just need to be on the front of it now.
Yes, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And I think disabled modeling is like, firstly, how serendipitous is that you were like walking down the street and then you got scouted, like considering that's what you wanted to do when you were little, like honestly, like what a serendipitous moment, being like, here
It
it
was
is, like
crazy.
your dream is literally being, you know, it's almost like the universe has like played its cards and been like, this is, you needed to do this because this had to happen because this is how it's going to work.
So it was so weird because I'm like, oh my gosh, here's me like 2 sizes bigger than I was back then, like a wheelchair user, older as well, like, you know, not 16, I'm in my 30s. And you're like, it's like, what? Like, I literally thought they were like, I thought they weren't being honest. I thought, oh, this is some kind of scam. This has got to be some kind of scam. But when my other half and I, we were like, okay, that's serious.
No, this is
Like,
legit.
this is, yeah, kind of thing. So we were like, first of all, we just taking a punt. And that's why you come with me just to make sure. But yeah, no, it was really, yeah, it was also, it was, you know, I mean, since then I'm not with them anymore, that modern agency anymore, but it was a great kind of catalyst to, you know, other things and other opportunities. And then just also like doing what I do as well, you know, the two works well, and, you know, the opportunities as well that I've had both as a model and an influencer, content creator. It's been,
like, and I think it's so important that, because, you know, we talk a lot about representation of disabled people, and like it is one of our like it's one of our favorite topics to talk about, because, you know, like historically and also factually, disabled people are completely underrepresented in every spectrum of life. Like that's not me playing like a woe is me card. That is like, that's factual. And I think it's so important to have people like you who are modeling and representing and showing up in spaces like Vogue to show that actually disabled people, women can get there. Like it's not unachievable for disabled people, because, you know, like you think about 10, 15 years ago, it would have been unachievable. Like that representation did not exist. And actually, you know, as disabled modeling and representation grows and grows and grows, you're kind of becoming a trailblazer for that, because you're at the forefront of it. Like I remember seeing you in a Tala campaign, and I literally like I can see it in my head, and it's like a turquoise like 2-piece set, and I can see it so clearly, because I was like, yes, another brand is taking a disabled woman and putting them in sports stuff. And like, for me, sport is like, it's a big part of my life. So when a sports brand embraces the disabled community, I'm more likely to buy from them, as is every other disabled person, like, because we are being represented. And I just think it's so
still with
fab.
Tala. I still wear Tala. I was wearing Tala today.
Were you?
I was. I still wear Tala. Like I love their brand, you know, and even just going on there, like even on their website. I was on their website the other day, and I was like, oh, let me see what they had, some offers. So I was looking, and then I saw myself. I was like, there's me. Like I was like, all these like years on, like my image is still. So it's just kind of, I think it was for the lingerie, the little, the knickers and the top, you know, like I was like, oh my gosh, which by the way is so bloody comfortable. It's so comfy because I wear that all the time. But yeah, it's you know, it's good quality stuff. It lasts as long, but it's great sustainability, and it's nice when a brand kind of, as you say, embraces, you know, different communities as well. You know, we do talk about representation matters. Sometimes it does feel like we're preaching to the choir on that one, because obviously we all know that, you know, it matters and we need it, and how vital it is. But yeah, the people that really need to hear it is the people outside of that community. And I feel like sometimes one of the best ways for me personally, my way was showing them what I can do. This is what I can do. We can shout and we can make a lot of noise, but sometimes just doing, because you know what they say, action are, you know, bigger than words. And sometimes, you know, that's what you need, rather than saying, oh, this is what I can do, why don't you have me like, well, this is what I do, here's my image, I'm tagging you, you can see it now. And you know, for me personally, that's always been an avenue of, I wanted my space that I created in social media and doing what I'm doing and everything for it to be positive.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of spaces that are already very vocal, and I didn't want to be like that. I wanted to be more inclusive, where it's not being, people are not listening because they're not part of that community.
Yeah.
My following are people with disabilities and people without disabilities, and which is a great thing, because how best to learn and try and make that change if they're not there? How are we going to do that? So I didn't want to make a space or create a space where they're not in the room. I wanted them to be in the room. I wanted them to be at the table. I wanted the idea is that we're all at the table, and to see that what we can do and the work we can do, like the quality that we can produce, the work, the ethic. We're not lazy. We want to work, but we also want to be paid well. We want to be heard, seen, and noticed.
Seriously.
Yeah, and taken seriously. But I'm very much I'm not going to wait for the door to open. I am busting it down kind of girl.
Yeah, I always say that if there isn't a seat at the table, I will stand on the table. Like, I'll be that person.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll be sprawled out all over the table. You will see me.
I'm a great dancer. Watch me.
Yeah. So it's been very much that has been like my ethos from the beginning, from me starting my blogging and social media and stuff like that. That's the way I've always dealt with it. But everybody's different, as I said. Everybody's people. I personally, when I was looking for somebody that looked a bit like me in the lifestyle that they led, I couldn't find anybody. And I wanted it to be positive. I just want to see someone like me, dressed nicely, doing something going out to dinner, traveling, having a party, and whatever it may, having a drink or two, like just like life,
Yeah.
And I couldn't find that. I didn't find that. I didn't find anyone that looked like me. It's, in the disabled community, I couldn't, somewhere that is as positive or has had a positive space that could help me on how I felt and get out of the place that I was. And I was like, okay, well, if I can't do that, once I felt like, I'm on a better journey now, maybe I can start sharing my journey, and then hopefully it will help somebody else if they are in that position, or if somebody you knew was in that position, that you can be like, oh, hey, check this out, kind of thing. Because that would have been amazing to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like, even children growing up as well, if parents see the potential of other people with disabilities, then they will have hope for their children as well. And I feel that's also really, really important. Not just the person themselves, but maybe the carer or provider or their guardian, or friends around them, just kind of see that you can live life to the fullest. You can, go after your dreams. You do matter. You are seen. You are, sorry, I'm going on and on.
No, I love it, because that's exactly why I created this podcast, was because I wanted to hear conversations between disabled people where disability wasn't necessarily the focus, but it was the thing that they had in common. Because quite often I personally find that when a disabled person is being interviewed, it's all about them and their life, and like, is it a tragedy or is it not a tragedy? And there's never really any different spin on it. It tends to be either like pity party or like, oh my goodness, congratulations for existing. And there doesn't tend to be like an in between. And I was like, where can I find these conversations where people are like, yeah, I'm disabled, it's not the most interesting part about my life, these are all the other cool things that I've done, but disability happens to be a factor as well. And I couldn't find it. And I think you've almost done the exact same, is that you've created the space that you wanted to see, and you wanted to listen to, and to show people as well. Because I'm very much, like, I'm very aware that this podcast is a lot about disability, and that's what joins us all together. But at the same time, I love it when able-bodied listeners listen to this and are like, whoa, like, I learned something new today. And I'm like, oh, like, amazing. And like you said, you want to have everybody at the table so that they can learn something new from everybody else. And I think that's a really brilliant way of putting it, because it's so true. Because screaming and shouting within the disabled community can be loud, right? We both know that. But there's only so much screaming and shouting that being inside the disabled community helps. You almost got to look outwards to help the situation.
And I also find, I also found some of the spaces that are screaming and shouting, I found it exhausting. It wasn't very, it was like a negative impact on my mental well-being, but it's not what I wanted. You're just feeding me what I already feel, or what I already see, or what I'm already experiencing. And what I want right now is hope. I want to be inspired, and I couldn't find that. And then there's the next thing as well. When I did see like a couple people doing something that was against the grain, they weren't black. They weren't a black woman. They wasn't, as I said, like sometimes, being a black woman and trying to get a diagnosis was so difficult as well. So it's like another thing. It's another
layer to the cake, isn't it? Like, it's not just a Victoria sponge, it's like a fucking stacked cake of like every single flavor that goes on.
It's a Victoria sponge with jam on top with coconut. It's got frosting, like. But so it's like, and seeing that, because like, especially in certain communities, certain ethnic communities, we don't see enough of like disabled people doing something as well. They're maybe hidden away, they're still of that old kind of how disabled history has gone on, and certain communities haven't, because of where they are economically, they've not had an opportunity to kind of progress from that way of thinking. So they're a little bit behind. So sometimes they're a little bit behind in that, or they don't have the infrastructure to kind of have their people be seen, if you see what I mean. And then also like sometimes that's just the way of thinking, like people will be like, oh my gosh, you're too young. And I'm like, oh, no. It's just like, but you're black. And I'm like, what's race and age got to do with it? Like, it's just like, they're just because they don't see it. When what they see, it could be like non-black people, non-brown people, but they don't see Asians or black people being, so therefore, if you're not seeing that, and you're only seeing one type of disabled person as well, who is be vocal, but has, because they have that privilege that they can do, then they feel, then it's like, well, we're not like them. We don't have that opportunity. We don't have that same privilege. So it's like another layer. And I just, I wanted something that I would have needed at that time. And I'm hoping that the space that I create is as inclusive as I could possibly be. Obviously, it's not going to be 100% to everybody's liking or needs. Let's be honest, it's impossible to do so. Everyone has that.
The other day.
Everybody has their own opinions. Disabilities come in different forms. While we may have that title, we also are a variety of people, just as there's a variety of non-disabled people, just like there's a variety of people that can read at different levels and have maths at different levels and could do quantum physics and algebra, and there's those that just add up. It's just... like, we have different levels, and everybody's, you've got brown hair, blonde hair, like you've got different short, tall, like everybody's different, we all have differences. It's just when it comes to certain abilities that you have a title on it, but if you start looking at each other as people, and be like, okay, I don't see why we can't have a model going down the runway you know?
And I love that so much, because what you say about inclusivity is that as soon as you try and include everyone, you're never going to make everyone happy, because it's impossible. Like, and there's that, like, what's the like famous phrase, is that like, you could be the juiciest peach in the whole world, but there'll still be someone who fucking hates a peach. Like
Yeah.
that, like, and it's true, because there will be. And
Yeah.
and it's such an interesting one to talk about, because what you and I might find inclusive, someone else might think is absolutely like an abomination, or like what
Yeah.
I might find inclusive is what you might not find inclusive. And it's having those conversations without being offended, and learning, because there's ignorance for ignorance sake, and then there's ignorance for like just being a dick, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And
Yeah.
that's like the truth of the matter, isn't it? And like, you know, some people are ignorant because they just don't know, whereas some people are ignorant because they're assholes. And like,
yeah. And sometimes with those people, there's no arguing
yeah,
with them. Sometimes you're like, oh, okay, honey.
like, no matter how many times I scream and shout at you, you're just never gonna understand.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I feel like, I hope that if I inspire one person, or I've given hope to one person, or one person can like learn from my journey and what I've put out there, then it will be great. And, and then, there's times when you're like, oh, am I making a difference? At the same time, this is a job, this is a career, this is like, a roof over my head, and, and everything else. So it's like, you take it seriously at the same time. It's not just like, oh, it's a hobby. It's not something you just kind of like, okay, I'm not doing this no more. I'm not doing it today. I'm going back to my day job. This is my job. One of the reasons why I also created it was because, and doing what I'm being able to do what I do, is that going to office every day and working for someone else while trying to manage my condition, I think isn't necessarily going to work. It's not really going to be ideal. At least I can be understanding about me. The reason why I can't turn up today.
It's so true.
Like those days when you're like, just going to sit on the sofa with my feet up, I'm in agony, but I'm going to do some emails and just be like, I'm apologize for like being a bit delayed, or, like in my reply kind of thing. But also just, and managing the expectations of the brands as well. It's like, well, okay, well, generally I'm like, well, my shoot day for this week is going to be on that date. So if you can get me the items to that, then I can do that, because I'm doing a load of other things as well that day. And that's how I kind of manage it, especially on the influencer side. And then I'm kind of like, if I've got a shoot with a brand, like a modeling shoot, then I'm like, okay, that day, and then the day before I need to rest. I don't need to do like, I'll go gym in the morning, but in the afternoon I'm going to have a nice relaxing kind of slow chilled afternoon, because I know that I'm going to be out first thing in the morning. And it's like a balance like that kind of thing. And then those days I'm like, okay, so early night, I wake up in the morning, I might go gym, I might not go gym, because obviously how my body feels after the day, because it's actually quite tiring. People don't realize how much physical work goes into it. So you need that stamina as well.
Yeah. And it's interesting that we move on to this, because the next question that I was gonna ask, and I think it's actually a really interesting one, particularly for you and your story, is that I personally believe that through like dark and hard times, which we all go through dark and hard times at some point in our lives, is that actually if you can focus on a positive attribute within yourself, you will find that gets stronger, or you'll come out of like a dark period of time and be like, whoa, I'm really impressed that I carried on with this, or like this attribute is actually so positive for me and I love it about myself. And I was wondering if you noticed any positive attributes about yourself during like the period of time that you've spoken about, where you kind of, after your diagnosis, where you were a bit unsure and you felt like you had a bit of a fog. Have you noticed like a personal positive attribute about yourself when it comes to that?
It's one of the things that I realized was being self-aware. How self-aware I was and in tune I was with my body and with my mental health, because I kept saying to people that I'm clinging on by my fingernails. I'm really clinging on to sanity with my fingernails. And it was like a way of kind of like asking for help. And I just didn't know how to ask for it. I'm like, and at the same time, a lot of people just kind of like, oh, you'll be fine, buck up, read a book, do something different, that kind of thing.
Have you tried yoga?
Yeah, it was so many different things. And like, and one of the things I was like, okay, do you know what? Stop. Boundaries. And I would say that's probably one of mine. I had to put boundaries in place because people around that, I was like, right, you're not actually helping me.
Yeah.
And all you're doing is they kept on looking for cures and stuff like that. And they're like, and I was just like, no, I need to accept. And if you can't accept that I need to accept, then maybe I can't be around you right now.
Yeah.
Right. I love you, but that doesn't mean I can be around you right now.
Yeah.
And it's just, making sure that I articulated how I felt. So if, in terms of like attributes, I think boundaries and is one of them. Is because it's something that a lot of people said I'm actually quite good at. I was like, oh, I wish I could create boundaries. Like you're so good at creating boundaries. And I was just like, for my own well-being, I've had to. And I realized that. And it was one of the things that got me out of that fog, that has put me on this path. And that is on where I am today. And something I still do today is like, I set boundaries. No, that's not happening. No, I can't do that. No, this is it. As I said, I was like, okay, this is my shoot day. If you want it done, and you want it, like, otherwise you're gonna have to wait till next week. I've got other things going on. I have to plan. I've got to, you've got to plan your diary, plan your rest. Everything gets planned. Spontaneity gets planned. Okay, I could be spontaneous between this day or that day or that time.
Between 2 and 5, there are my spontaneous hours. Take your pick.
So it's like between 2 and 5 on a Tuesday or a Thursday, every other Thursday, but not the same Thursday.
I love that so much.
Wednesdays is like a rest day, because if I've been spontaneous on Tuesday afternoon, I'm going to definitely need the rest on the Wednesday. And that's for Sundays. Don't ask me.
Sundays are a write-off. Like, no way,
Sundays
no how.
Sundays are a no. I do not leave the house on a Sunday. Like, you have to be very special for me to leave the house on a Vogue. Maybe leave the house on a Sunday, and if you're not
her
Vogue,
on the front cover.
Yeah. When I did the Vogue shoot, it was on a Sunday, and I was like, "It's a Sunday." And they were like, "It's Vogue." I went, "It's still a Sunday."
It's still a Sunday, but I'm gonna do it. Like, through gritted teeth.
Yeah, it literally was. I was like, Sunday. It's I like to have my lie in and put a face mask on and have it's like my 100% recuperation day. I don't leave the house.
Yeah.
Like, even my sister the other day, she was like, "Oh, do you fancy going to a rooftop bar on a Sunday?" It's not gonna happen.
It's a Sunday. You already know the answer is a no.
I was like, "It's a Sunday." I says, "Yeah, but if it's a bank holiday Monday, maybe." Because then I will move Sunday to Monday. Yeah. So I would say, like, boundaries, and just kind of, knowing what's works for you, that's suited for you, my well-being, my mental and physical well-being, articulating that and setting those boundaries.
I love that. And interestingly, I think that, like, setting boundaries is probably, like, it's a good piece of advice for anyone. And I just wondered, do you have a piece of advice for either a younger Clara or a younger person with the same disability as you?
Life is not over. You are loved. You will be loved. Life goes on. It won't stop, and you're going to have an amazing life.
Yeah.
Things get better. For sure.
I love
that. Yeah. And to somebody who is younger, aim for the universe, not the sky, not the stars, but for the universe. Like, end of the day, it's, if you want whatever you want in life, if you really want it, you can work at it, you make it happen. If you can't see it, be it. And anything is possible. So never stop believing.
Oh, I love that.
Manifest what you want.
I actually love that. So I feel like you just spoke to like a part of my chest at that point. Like I felt like what you said. I was like, oh yeah, like I love that so much.
Yeah,
Because I think
something. Yeah,
it's
people say
important
aim for
thing,
the
isn't it?
sky's the limit, but it's like, no, it's not.
And I love that because I've obviously like when you're little you always get told like aim for the moon and you'll fall amongst the stars, but what you said is actually like no, fuck the stars, like aim for the universe because that's way bigger and it's cooler.
Yeah, it's like just aim big, aim, to literally infinity, and
Yeah.
just like anything is possible. And if you can't see yourself represented out there, then you use yourself to represent others and create something that would be mega,
Yeah.
that your young self would have loved to have seen.
Oh, I love that so much. And this is going to take an absolute like 180, 360. I'm not necessarily sure of the masks. I'm not very good at it. But I always think about intrusive questions that people ask me because I find them interesting, sometimes funny, sometimes annoying.
Oh, here we go.
The one that gets me the most is, did a shark bite your arm off? And like, no, that never happened. But I'm always intrigued to hear about what other people's intrusive questions are that they find like slightly annoying and hilarious.
One comment that people make that really, really annoys me is, I don't look like a disabled person. Like, I was like, you're not, the way you dress, the way you are, like you don't look like a disabled person. Like, I don't know. It's like sometimes people have this, it's like, am I meant to wear a particular kind of clothing and zip it up to be like, okay, I'm disabled kind of thing? Like, do I have to put on a uniform? Like, fashion is for everybody because everybody wears it. None of us wanders around naked. So it doesn't matter if I'm fashionable or I just wear fashion.
Yeah.
Just say I'm fashionable. Girl, you're fashionable, you got style. Just say that. I say to people, I said, you know what? You should have just said, girl, I like your style. I do like your style. That's what you should have said.
Like, just go with that. Go with the first thing. Go with the nice compliment. Thank you.
Just say, like, do you know what, girl, I like your style. Thank you. Rather than you don't look like someone who's disabled. It's like I said to someone the other day. There is fashion. There's someone that wears fashion, and then people that are fashionable. Clearly, I'm fashionable and I have style, right? But those that just wear fashion, you could be disabled or non-disabled. You just wear fashion. But you can also have people who are fashionable and have style, who are disabled and not disabled. That is it. Yeah. Clothes are clothes. It's made for everyone and no one walks around naked.
It's a fact. That's why it's so funny. Because it's the truth of it. And I think that's hilarious and perfect as well.
Yeah, so there's that one. Obviously, the medical history bit is quite annoying. People ask, do you have sex? I say, do you have sex? Why do you?
Okay, so you're not going to be the first person to say that to me, but you're also not going to be the last, because I hear about this so much and I just don't like, who thinks it's acceptable to go up to someone and be like, so does it work?
Yeah, do you still have sex? And you're like, or can you have sex? Or can you have children? Do you want children? If you have children, would you have will it have your condition? Or is that the reason why you don't have kids yet? All those kind of questions. You're like,
just
why? Is that the reason? Is you being nosy the reason why you haven't had children yet? Because you're just
it's unbelievable how much people think disabled people owe them in terms of like the answers to the questions that they ask. Like, I'm not an encyclopedia for you to ask all your questions. Like, I don't need to share this information with you. I don't need to, and also I don't need to educate you on my own disability. Like, if we're friends, maybe. But if we're not and I don't know you, you can piss off. Like, I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the questions that I tend to, can you stand at all? I know there are people who are wheelchair users that can stand and they can walk, but unless someone tells you, me personally would rather you presume that I can't.
Uh-huh.
Like, I know some people may not feel like that, but that's their choice if they can, right? But for me personally, it's like, I'm like, no, if I could, I would have got out this chair and got up the stairs myself. You know, and then the one that I get the most from taxi drivers, which is quite hilarious, and I don't know, sometimes I have to, depending on my moods, depends the answer that I say. They pull up and they're like, do you need the ramp? I don't even know as what to say that. So there's times when I'm not in the, I'm like, sometimes it's like, obviously, they don't like when I'm being petty like that though. But there's times when I am petty like that.
Yeah.
And then there's times I'm like, yeah, because this wheelchair doesn't go upstairs yet. It hasn't quite worked out how to go up a step yet. So yeah, I definitely do need a ramp.
Again.
And all day people ask me, is the chair coming in as well? No, I'm leaving it behind.
Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it on the sidewalk. Like, it's just gonna stay here because you can just actually pick one up on the sidewalk as you do.
This is like, you know, like a trolley basket you get in the supermarket. You could just like, you use it, you leave it anywhere, like kind of thing. It's one of those. It's not. Yeah.
Rent a chair. We just like say where our location is, and someone like magically appears with a new chair. Like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, is that coming with you?
Like, where else is it gonna go?
And then it's like, oh no, because I know some disabled people can walk. What? And they leave their chair?
I think, do you know what though? I think that's the same with all disabled people. It literally, like, it depends what mood you catch people in. And like, say, like, don't get me wrong, that's the same for like 99.9% of the population. But particularly when it's like a question about disability, like, it really depends what mood you catch that person in. Because there have been times where I've been so blunt and so honest. And then there have been times where I've been like, I can't even have this conversation, and like walked away. Or other times where I've kind of like fed into a lie, and I've been like, yeah, like this is how it is for everyone. And you see the story formulating in people's faces, and then you're like, no, all of that's a lie. How did you believe that? Like how? like we don't have some secret society where we all hang out and we all swap like mobility aids and all that kind of stuff. Like, that doesn't happen. That's not how it works. But like, I'm really happy that you thought that it did.
So yes, those are kind of like my weird ones, and it just depends on how petty I want to be that time.
I love it. I have only got one more final question for you, Clara.
Okay.
And that is, can you say that you're disabled and proud?
I am disabled and proud. I'm proud to be disabled.
Thank you so much for giving up your time today, for coming on this podcast. I have genuinely loved it, and I've learned an awful lot as well, which is exactly what I wanted out of it, and I'm sure loads of other people will as well. And I think it's just been a fantastic chat about disability and inclusion and representation. And like, I can only say thank you because I've loved it. So thanks so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me on. I'm pleased that you are happy with how it went. And yeah, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much.